All right, so this is a brief discussion of, well, it's going to be brief, whatever. I'll believe it when I hear it. Of the famous Gil Scott Heron, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." And really, it's a savage, detailed attack on white middle class culture that would like to swallow angry black folk, basically, and make them go away. And so Heron is going to spend most of his time attacking consumer culture. And he's also going to take a shot at people who he clearly feels are not doing anybody any favors along the way, which is interesting because, you think, oh, everybody was friends. Oh, and all the peaceniks were friends. Like, oh, no. There were these massive rifts, which we'll see. So, okay, so why won't the revolution be televised? Because it's going to really happen, and you have to go out and do it. Now, at the point that he's writing and singing, or rapping, really, Nixon is in, right? So that we've now crossed 1968, and we're into this world which is where everything is happening on the television. And this is why, at this point in media studies, McLuhan becomes so very important, because McLuhan has got the goods, it sounds like, on how television is screwing with our brains, and he does have a lot of really good things to say. I like McLuhan, I just wouldn't try to make a science out of it. I think he's a poet, but okay. So he says right away, Heron starts off by attacking Timothy Leary, right? You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. So this is a quotation or a paraphrase of Timothy Leary's, tune in, turn on, drop out, which was because Leary was experimenting with LSD, as were a number of people in California. I don't mean they just weren't taking it, but they were seriously taking it and recording their, what their experiences were, and they were trying to get meaning out of it, and so on. And John Lilly, who was a famous neuroscientist, I guess, psychiatrist, neuroscientist, was this is I have no idea how anybody survives this kind of thing. But anyway, he was getting into these immersion tanks, or sensory deprivation tanks, which you can still do. I'm not even sure if it's a thing. I think that they're still using, I think they call them tranquility tanks now. But basically, they have salt. I think they have salt water in them, so they float your body easily. And they're heated. The water is heated to like blood temperature. So you get in this thing, and then there's a support behind your head. They close the lid. It looks like a coffin. And there's no light inside. And so then, and it's soundproof. So there's no input. Is the idea, and it's lightless, soundless. And you lie there, and you probably sleep, and you start to whatever. Well, Lilly was this incredibly. These people appeared to be truly fearless, and Leary, I think, was like this. Would drop acid and then get in the tank, and have these trips while he was completely desensitized. Basically, there was no input, or there's less input to the system, because the body is floating in this warm fluid. Anyway, so turn it. That's what that refers to is, plug in, turn on, cop out, well, drop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on skag, heroin. Skip out for a beer during commercials. Which is what you would do. You'd wait for a commercial, and you're like, okay, this is it. You don't want to miss the show, and you'd go out and get beer or whatever you wanted to do. And then here are the corporate sponsors. So this is the beginning of the perception. Well, not the beginning of it, but it's addressing this perception by the hippies, who, remember, have good education, many of them, that big business runs the world. And so Xerox, it will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. And so there will be branding by Xerox. And this was the beginning of, instead of, rather than, say, advertise for Xerox copiers or whatever it is, why don't you just own the whole program? In fact, why don't you just own the network? And everything that happens comes to Xerox or IBM or whatever it might be. And then he takes on the political class. Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spiro Agnew was the vice president. John Mitchell was one of Nixon's. He went down with Nixon. Basically, he was one of the dirty, corrupt politicians in the White House. General Abrams, his name was given to the Abrams tank. There's Creighton Abrams. Eat hog maws confiscated from our Harlem sanctuary. So it'd be like get your soul food, stolen soul food. It would not be brought to you by. So then he attacks elite culture, right? The Schaefer Award Theater is sort of it's sort of elite, but sort of not. It's kind of like HBO. Your mainline to elite culture. HBO. It's mainline to television. You want elite culture, you have to go to the Met. You got to go to New York City, or you got to go to a big, just Chicago. And hear a big. You got to pay, and you got to be in the right place, and you got to be part of the right group. And then he names at this point some famous actors, but famous people had a lot of cultural clout. So Natalie Woods, who was going to be killed, who was going to die relatively soon. Steve McQueen, same thing, young death. Bullwinkle or Julia. This is Julia Childs, and then he attacks the ads. Sex appeal. So you use mouthwash, you'll have sex appeal, which was a marketing thing at the time. Not get rid of the nubs. I suspect that's a hair thing for African Americans. I'm not sure. Don't know the reference. Make you look 5 pounds thinner. There will be no pictures. Okay, so you and Willie Mae. Yeah, so here's the sort of there won't be pictures of you rioting and stealing things. Trying to slide that color TV onto a stolen ambulance. And so again, this is the same stuff that Trouble Coming Every Day is about, that Frank Zappa is on about. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. And then he replays that line. So that's sort of the clever part of that line, is that there won't be white pigs, policemen shooting black men on instant replay. They'll show you again. It's because white people like to see black people being shot. And then he replays it right away. Whitney Young being routed to Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. The new slow motion stylized Roy Wilkins. Roy Wilkins is an NAACP guy, and so here he's dispensing with basically the people in the black community who are at this point this part of the movement is people who are sort of, he's lining up more, the politics here are lining up more with the Panthers because there's going to be a revolution. It's going to be a violent revolution. So he's lining up with the Panthers, which means he's rejecting the he's rejecting the Martin Luther King sort of NAACP get along to go along. The argument is from the militant side of the black movement that the people who are doing things legally and by law are wasting their time, and they are just playing Uncle Tom. Basically, it's a brutal argument inside the black community. It fissures the black community, drives it apart, and is going to produce this the inheritors of Malcolm X in the Black Panthers and the inheritors of the civil rights movement of passive resistance and peaceful resistance from Martin Luther King. And ultimately, the NAACP is going to come out the winner, which is, I'm a white leftist. What can I say? I can't. I think that's the way to go. I mean, I think if you're going to have persistent and lasting change, it has to come about because you change the laws and you change people's ways of thinking, as opposed to beating them to death and so on, which is usually not very successful. But a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit he's been saving for just the proper occasion. Red, black, and green are the colors of many African flags, and or Islam. Red, black, and green are that's right. Yeah, green, black, red, white, usually white, green, red, very commonly associated with Islam. Green is a color that's very often associated with Islam. And remember that the Panthers are switched from Christianity to Islam. Okay, there will be no, and so then the same kind of thing. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news, and no pictures. Now this is an interesting thing here. So what an attack this is on the women's movement, including women of color, right? So no pictures of hairy arm women liberationists. So this would refer to women who refuse to shave their armpits, which was for a brief time a thing, and it was a great thing. It was like suddenly the beauty world had to like, oh my God, women aren't buying razors anymore. It was great. Women stopped shaving their arms, they stopped their armpits, they stopped shaving their legs. It was terrific, and there's a lot less infections, especially in the summer. And it was like, yeah, women are hairy too. It's like they're human beings. They're not these sort of perfect, which men were fetishizing. These sort of innocent things, which you would be completely hairless and have large breasts and the whole thing. So this fetish, Jackie Onassis, who at this point is Jackie Kennedy, who was remarried Aristotle Onassis, who was a famous Greek tycoon, doing something completely unimportant, like blowing her nose. But people still love Jackie Onassis, Jackie O, as they came to call her. The theme song will not be written by Francis Scott Keys, and so here he nails off he nails a bunch of sort of the middle of the line, often white, sort of cheesy lounge singers, or C&W singers, in this case Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash. Actually, Johnny Cash is one of those things where we've had to come and because of Cash's politics, he's undergone a relook, basically a revised look by many people, and have said, Johnny Cash, especially Folsom Prison Blues, Engelbert Humperdinck, it's sort of like the center of the Las Vegas lounge world. The revolution will not be right back. And then it will not be about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. And then he goes through a series of ads at the time. The dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, the giant in your toilet bowl, things will not go better with Coke. And so he's taking aim at specific brands here. The dove in your bedroom, I suspect, is Dove the soap, Dove. The tiger in your tank is Tony the Tiger, which was, I think it was Standard Oil's ad, Esso, Exxon. The giant in your toilet bowl, I think it was Mr. Clean. Might have been Janitor in a Drum. it's like, I think it was Mr. Clean. It will not go better with Coke. Okay, everybody gets that. Will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. Same thing, It will not. There was I think it was an insurance company that used to say, or maybe it was a car company that used to say, we put you in the driver's seat, and they would show you this guy actually being floated into the driver's seat. They'd be sort of sitting there. So he's just nailing all this stuff, and he's like, it's merciless. And so this is very much a song of protest, and it was just sort of, again, one of these songs which was very clever about the media. It was very prescient about the media and astute about the media, and enraged, and it's black male rage. And remember that in the Black Panther movement, they say that the women were given equal treatment. But if you look at, I have not done enough work on this, but if you look at Warren Steele used to assign Asada's book, I think it's just called Asada, by Asada Shakur, and it's a pretty disturbing picture of how badly black women were treated by the male Black Panthers. Men in general, when they talked about liberation or when they talked about freedom and this revolution, the revolution was for men initially first, and women. If women hadn't spoken up for themselves and pushed for ERA, we wouldn't be any further ahead than we are now.